We'll get started. I don't know if there are some advisory board members still working hard in the other room. We'll have Mike go
They can hear you.
wrangle them. Welcome. This is the Dean's Panel that's part of the 25th and 50th anniversary celebrations for computing at Georgia Tech. It's really unusual and very special to have everyone that's been in that role present on this panel today. That's all three deans, two interim deans, and a longtime friend and member of the advisory board, Syed M., joining us. Syed, I asked him how long he'd been on the advisory board, and he said probably in total it's more than 20 years. He got time off for good behavior for a while, then apparently his behavior diverged, and he got put back on again. So he's seen us over many, many years and from an insider-outsider perspective. I'm Ellen Zagura. I'm a professor in the School of Computer Science, and I've had the unique and usually pleasant experience of reporting to each one of these deans. I think I'm the only person, I may be the only person, staff and faculty, who falls in that category. Then Mary Alice Isley might have me beat, or have me tied. I'm sure I'm the only faculty member who falls in that category. So if we have any lull, I'll try to dig out some stories. One of our colleagues advised me yesterday that I should Google why panels suck. Nothing like a vote of confidence. So I did, and actually that was quite interesting. And I took away a couple of rules. One of them is to keep introductions and opening remarks short.
Keep everything short.
I don't actually think any of these panelists need an introduction, and I mean that in the most literal way. And so I'm not going to introduce them. You can read their names. They are each going to get to start with a short anecdote from the college's history, and I advise them to keep in mind that opening remarks should be kept short. And with that, we'll make our way around the group. I think I'd suggest that we have Peter, Richins, V, and then come back for Jim and Syed, and I'll sit down unless they talk too long, and then I'll stand up. Peter?
Ellen, thank you. If you don't know who I am, you don't belong here.
I'm leaving.
Bye. That's the anecdote. I actually wanted to start off by sharing with you very briefly the four principles that I think we established at the start of the College of Computing, not the 1945, 1954, 19 whatever, but 1990 when the college was formed and I came in. The first and most important principle that we tried to maintain at all times was the principle of community. That meant respect for all people at all levels in their jobs and as people. And of course it meant teamwork. The second was to try to always have the highest quality in everything we did, in our actions, in the people that we hired and worked with, and all of the other activities that we were engaged in any way. The third was to then have a strategic action, to take strategic action. That meant having some explicit plans, but being open to change, constant revision, and opportunities. And the fourth was to have, in the context of all of the above, a world-class infrastructure of people, support people, to support the important work of the college, the faculty, the students, to have a lean infrastructure that carried out and implemented and enabled actions against a strategic plan of the highest quality.
Thank you, Peter.
Hi, I'm Rich DeMello, and I'm wearing fleece for a reason. I'll tell you about it a little later on. So it's not very often that you have a conversation with someone where the exact moment and the exact wording in the conversation is sort of seared into your brain forever. But a few days after I was officially starting as Dean of the College of Computing, we had an off-site retreat. And all the faculty in the college got together, and we talked about where we were going to go, and we had a facilitator. Because I had been on the college advisory board when I was at Hewlett-Packard, I knew that there were underrepresented people in the student ranks of the College of Computing, namely women people. And so this came up at the retreat. And I must have said something that was kind of mumbling and not very directional in how I wanted to deal with that issue, because as soon as there was a break, Beth Minot and Amy, is Amy here? No. Pulled me aside in the hallway and said, I'll paraphrase because we're being recorded, and I'm aware of that. They said, "Look, you dummy, if you want diversity, you have to have intellectual diversity." And this was one of those moments when a light bulb went up. Of course, if you want diversity of any kind, you have to have intellectual diversity, and that launched a series of events in the college that we've had our ups and downs as far as diversity, in particular gender diversity in the college, but it launched a series of events that continue to this day. Women at CC was launched as a direct result of that conversation, and Jillian and Kristen were the first chairs of that. We had an advisory board meeting the following spring, and we brought in a group of undergraduates, maybe a graduate student or two, who talked about their experiences as women in the undergraduate program in pretty compelling terms, and that led us to take some action. So, in terms of anecdotes, there are plenty of funny anecdotes. There are plenty of things that we could talk. This is just one of those conversations that you have when you're changing roles in life, where it just crystallizes what you should do. And so that's my anecdote and my story. Thank you, Beth.
Thank you, Rich. Zvi?
So I told Ellen, I told some of you already.
He needs a mic.
I told Ellen and told some of you already that I was invited by mistake because these gentlemen are the past. I'm the future.
We laid the foundation.
So I'll tell you a couple anecdotes.
He's 6 months younger than I am. So.
And I'm an old man compared to both of them.
I'll take you for a race after the talk. So I'll tell you a couple of anecdotes about our partners in OMS. So first about Sebastian. OMS CS was born early September 2012, not really, but that when Sebastian came to me and he said, let's do an MS degree for $1,000. And I know numbers, especially with dollar signs, so I told him 1,000 won't do, maybe 4,000. Ended up 6,000. So that's how it all started. Actually, now Sebastian wants to raise the tuition much more than we do. So, because they are a private company, he has to show revenues, etc. Another place where Sebastian reversed himself is Sebastian was gung-ho on having the master program totally flexible. People will come anytime, start, and will finish anytime. Everybody in their own pace. So we mentioned it to the Georgia Tech bureaucracy, they went berserk. You know, they cannot do it, you know, you cannot handle that. But then, like 6 months ago, Sebastian tells me, you are right. It's much, much better to have semester. It's much, much better to have time frame where people start and finish at the same time. Otherwise, there is no discipline and you lose many, many more of them. So that's Sebastian. Now to AT&T. Sebastian and I went to AT&T in beginning of January of 2012. It was in the middle of the time that our task force, we haven't decided yet to do it, and they gave us $2 million. And then they expected that we will finish our approval process in 1 week or two. They didn't understand that universities are not the real world. So it took actually 2 months and altogether 6 months or 6.5 months, which I consider a world record. The other half about AT&T, so we went in actually January, they promised us $2 million. It happened then, but it also happened in August when I got the second $2 million. What happens, Charles, by the way, Charles apologizes, he's in the airport now. You know, we live in the airport. You know my address. My address is...
No, he's back there, actually.
He's back?
He told you.
He's so small and you can
Where's
hardly
Charles?
see him or recognize him.
Oh, you're
but-
still here? Okay. So I take back the apology. So Charles and I went again to the top people, Randall Stevenson, Bill Blaze of AT&T, and essentially they gave us again in August, that was last August, another $2 million, which actually put OMSCS on a very solid financial footing. But guess what? The foundation people, it happened also in the first time, were insulted because they gave us already the money. What they did to us was Chinese torture. They started to demand all sorts of things. It took 5 months. Do this, do marketing plan. We did everything. So let's eventually they gave us the money because actually the decision was already made in August. And finally, so this is very mild anecdotes. I have some horror stories, but I'm not allowed to tell them.
We'll save those for another panel. Jim?
Back in the 90s, the college played with the idea and floated the idea of developing a graduate degree in software engineering. Engineering was a very sacrosanct term and was a property of another entity that didn't go anywhere. When I became interim dean, we had in the college the School of Interactive Computing, the School of Computer Science, and the Division of Computational Science and Engineering. So there was that engineering word that Rich and others had very nicely injected, but it was only a division. I was working with Richard Fujimoto on the process of getting approval for the school, for it to be the School of Computational Science and Engineering. And we were concerned about and this had to be approved by all kinds of groups, including the Academic Senate. So we're concerned about what would be the attitude of our colleagues in engineering. So I had a casual conversation with Jean-Louis Chameau, who at that time was Dean of Engineering. Asked him, Jean-Louis, how do you feel about this? I said, well, you know, for what I do, and he did modeling of fluid flows in the heart and some other very computationally intense things. You know, for what I do, it's really, we need computational engineering. We need all the things that this group is doing. It was when he said that I knew it would be okay, because he was, even if his faculty would be pushing on him the fact that he was very appreciative and said this, made me feel very reassured that when it came up to the votes that everything would be okay, and everything was okay, and the final brick in putting together the three schools in the college was realized. Yeah.
To paraphrase Peter, if you think I'm a former dean of the college, you're in the wrong place. I'm a product of Georgia Tech, but I've served the college always as an outsider, representing the technology community and beneficiary of what you do. My first involvement with the college was when Pat Creasine had decided that there was going to be a College of Computing, and nobody on campus was supporting him, except perhaps a couple of people who already were going to be included in it. And he needed some support from the outside for a political cover. So he had formed a group of outsiders of technology business people in town to help promote this idea. So my involvement in College of Computing goes back to, I guess, would be 1989. In the vein of what Jim was talking about in terms of campus politics, somewhere along the line, I've been on and off the advisory board for some time, and somewhere along the line, Bill Goodhue, who was on the board as well, and the two of us decided that we had this bright idea that it was good for Georgia Tech, it was good for College of Computing, it was good for the state of Georgia if Georgia Tech required that everybody at Georgia Tech have a minor in computer science, right?
That's the current situation.
Seemed like a reasonable idea. And then we found out how the university really worked.
Yeah.
We, at the risk of losing our limbs, we backed off in a matter of months. So it's been a pleasure to be involved in the college.
So, Syed, you may be interested to hear you were just ahead of your time. We now have burgeoning enrollments in our undergraduate classes, and one no small part of that is actually the CS minor, and is very popular, especially with engineering. One of the other rules about panels is that they should be discussions, not a sort of serial monologues. So I've got a set of questions, and what I'm going to do with these questions, and the panelists, if they read their email in the last 12 hours, know this. I'm going to direct each one starting to one person, and I have someone I'm going to chosen to follow up with. We will not do serial panel where each person answers each question, no assembly line. I'd also welcome the audience to play some role, although I may reserve the right to move us along. I want to pick up first on something that came out in several of the comments, and that has to do with the arc of the way that the College of Computing has been viewed in its relationship to the rest of campus over its history. I think I know that has changed quite a bit over time, and I think it's something that is a part of our history that's worth having kind of reflecting on how and why and when these sorts of changes took place. So I wonder, Peter, if I could ask you to start. Syed gave some indication, but you could say more from those early years of the College of Computing about the relationship to the rest of Georgia Tech.
It was mixed. Do you want more?
That would definitely be following the keep it short.
Or is that the one-word answer?
You can give a few
read
more.
my notes wrong. It was mixed in the following way. In thinking back for those first 12 years, while there were a few pockets of animosity left, would you mind moving that? I can't see Syed. Thank you.
I didn't do it.
There were a few pockets of animosity, as Syed mentioned, basically just individuals, not whole units. I would characterize primarily the first years as benign neglect. We were small. I think I was faculty member number 34 or 35. Sham Navate had been hired the year before, but not come yet. So the two of us were the first two new hires, if you will. And so to a certain extent, we weren't worth much attention. Ultimately, that probably changed to kind of indifference. There was strong support. I don't think I can give you precise transition points because some of these overlapped and probably exist today. But there was certainly Pat Creasine was a very strong supporter. There were a few others on campus. ISYE as a group was very supportive in the earlier days as well as later, for sure. One of the things I alluded to in my talk yesterday was that the SY is in ISYE because of one of the first computer science or information and computer science professors, Pranas Zunde. There was some antagonism. I think eventually, with all due respect, EE at the time realized that maybe they were missing out on a good bet, changed their name to ECE. In fact, one of the things that I gleaned from my reading and listening to Vladimir Slameka was that in the early days, the head of EE told him point blank, there will never be computer science in EE, it'll be over my dead body. It was not quite as adamant when I arrived, fortunately. So that's how I would describe the relations.
Thank you, Peter. Rich, I wonder if you might follow up on this arc with things that you saw that were different during your time period. And I'll share one phrase that sticks out in my mind, which was that of linking arms with Roger Webb as a piece of the sort of continued both strategy and I think success of the college.
Yeah, that was important. If you think back to Peter's Noonan lecture yesterday, the history of the College of Computing came out of the sciences. It was in the College of Science. Came out of the sciences, and even worse, the soft sciences. So it was psychology and linguistics and philosophy.
Information science.
Yeah, and so the patina around computer science at Georgia Tech was always, this, we weren't quite sure what this is, but it's not engineering. And so I don't think that there was anyone, when I was hired as dean, there wasn't anyone in engineering that was really prepared for the idea of having an engineer as a dean of the College of Computing. But I had engineering chops when I came in. Roger Webb had been if not an office mate when I was a graduate student, right across the hall from me. And so I had known Roger from the time I was a first-year graduate student at Georgia Tech. And to put a little color on Jim's story about computational science and engineering, I had a plan for moving engineering into just as ECE had a plan for moving computing into ECE. I had a plan for moving engineering into the College of Computing, which culminated in the event that Jim talked about. And it began with 1301. Remember, Intro to Computing 1301, we were getting killed by engineers because we were teaching them stuff that had nothing to do with day-to-day engineering. And so I offered an olive branch to Don Giddens, the Dean of Engineering, I said, well, Don, I'll let you guys form a steering committee for 1301. You can tell us what kinds of applications, what kinds of programming languages you want. And it sort of diffused a whole bunch of simmering resentment about the way that we were dealing with the engineers that served me better a little later on. So as we were forming the Division of Computational Science and Engineering, and I was a constant thorn in Don's side about the name engineering. Deans get together, maybe they still do, for a wine and wine session every month, first Wednesday of the month. And so Giddens and I would have these shouting matches about whether or not, literally shouting matches, about whether or not engineering would ever be in the College of Computing. Culminated in a meeting with Chameau, where Chameau said, boys, go fight your own battles. I don't want to hear any more about it. So Don and I were left to our own devices. And to make a long story short, the deciding factor was UGA deciding to mount an engineering curriculum. So somehow I had managed to convince Giddens that if we didn't have a computational science and engineering program in the College of Computing, there would be one at the University of Georgia. And the only idea he hated worse than us having engineering was having UGA. So he said, I give up, and it was smooth sailing ever since. And actually, Don was a great friend and champion for the College of Computing throughout my tenure. He did a lot of very kind things for the college that never really got acknowledged. Not the least of which was this idea that College of Computing could have a piece of the engineering title.
So both Jim and Peter wanted to add something.
The one marker of broader acceptance at Tech of computing, never mind engineering specifically, was whenever Tech decided that the one hallmark was when Tech decided that every freshman or every student, every undergraduate should have a computing course. I don't remember exactly when that happened, but for me, that was a really important watershed moment. Maybe Peter remembers when it was.
Yeah, I think it was in the redesign of the campus general curriculum in 1999 for the conversion.
Heading into semesters?
From the conversion of
96,
quarters to
97.
semesters, and we had been trying an experiment building up to that, which ultimately we felt worked, except it self-destructed because it was not sustainable.
Right.
I wanted to add just a small anecdote to something that Rich said, and that is that he mentioned the deans got together for wine and cheese, etc. That's a remnant, interestingly, of something that was going on when I arrived in 1990 that had been organized by Bill Sangster, the longtime dean of engineering, a big burly guy. He was a civil engineer if you ever saw one, little gruff, etc. And it was called the Dean's SelfHelp Group because at that time they had just officially finished this big reorganization. The deans were kind of in the dark about what was going on because Creasine wasn't always the most transparent person around. And so the deans would get together and try to figure once a week maybe for the self-help group. We'd have lunch and we would invite somebody in, the head of finance or the head of contracting or whatever to talk to us and tell us what the hell's going on up there. And it turned out that because of various administrative things, Bill and I were the only two permanent deans as of July 1, 1990. And Bill and I became good friends, surprisingly, which is one way that I won things over, was through personal diplomacy, worked on several fronts. And he retired a year later. So within a year, I was the senior sitting dean. And that helped a little bit.
Thank you. I wanted to share one thing that I have seen change over the more than 20 years that I've been in the college, and that has to do not only with the way that the discipline has become part of the fabric of Georgia Tech, but also I think the people, the faculty leadership has become part of the fabric of Georgia Tech in a way that was not the case with the same numbers and stature that it is today. And so when I think about that, I think about Beth Minot heading the IPAT IRI, Henrik Christensen heading the Robotics and Intelligent Machines IRI, Dana Randall and Srinivas Alaru pushing a third IRI. That's really quite impressive that 3 of the not so many IRIs would be headed by College of Computing faculty members. I think about the new quality enhancement plan, because I can't think about much of anything else, co-directed by a faculty member in the College of Computing. I think about the Center for 21st Century Universities. What is the future of the university, headed by College of Computing faculty member. These are examples that in both number and stature are a relatively new phenomenon to see that kind of leadership. Partly, we're getting old. Beth's smiling at me. She's saying she's not getting old. So the computing is growing up, and College of Computing faculty members are growing up, but we're also growing into and embracing these kind of leadership roles in a way that I think speaks very positively for the future of the College of Computing. This is a question that Zvi won't be able to answer. He's going to feel again like maybe he's on the wrong panel, and you'll see he's occupying himself just fine in any case. This is a question about the biggest changes you've seen in the college since you stepped down, and I'm going to let Rich take this one first if you'd be willing.
You mean about me since yesterday?
Yeah, what's the biggest change since yesterday? More money, $2 million to more dollars? All right, Rich.
So there's been a lot of changes. It's hard to single out one, but I'm kind of wearing one today. So this is the first edition of a MOOC jacket, a MOOC instructor's jacket. It says MOOC instructor, 100% quality, and it's sort of got a Budweiser wreath around it. And if I stood up, you could see emboldened on the back, Georgia Tech and Coursera. And of course, it's not a pretty sight, so.
It's on your better side.
Yeah, so it's a metaphor for what's happened over the last 4 years. The growth, dramatic, explosive growth of interest on this campus in pedagogy and teaching has been remarkable. It wasn't so long ago when we would actually counsel incoming junior faculty members to not pay too much attention to teaching because it was going to screw up your research career. And so the things that we did to kind of move teaching front and center at Georgia Tech was a concerted effort, not really planned, but more like a march. In the old Frankenstein movies, the villagers would march on the castle and storm the gates. It had that quality to it. And there's one little story I want to tell around this. So I was here as an assistant professor and associate professor 2 generations ago in the 1970s when Ray Miller was hired as school director back then. And at that time, Georgia Tech would not hire anyone in with tenure. But Ray Miller was far and away one of the most prestigious people that Georgia Tech would have had on its faculty. Because no one was looking at the School of Information and Computer Science, I sort of arranged to have this appointment that would have tenure associated with it on the way in. Well, the provost at that time was Henry Bourne. The dean was Henry Volk. They found out about it and went ballistic. Ray was already here. He was in position. And they were now going to tell him he wasn't tenured. So I spent 4 hours with these two guys arguing that this would be a disaster if Georgia Tech revoked tenure from Ray Miller. And there was one turning point in the conversation when Henry Bourne looked at me and said, you know, it's illegal to do this. And I said, oh, really?
In Georgia.
In Georgia. Show me where. And he backed down. So I learned a very important lesson early on in my academic career. When you're told that something's illegal, it's probably not.
Challenge it.
And I had that tucked away when we started negotiating with Coursera for MOOCs, because we were told by every lawyer up and down the line, it's illegal to do this. And I, you know, in my best associate professor voice, I said, "Oh, really? Show me where." And of course, it wasn't illegal, and we kind of pushed things through.
Jim, I wonder if you might, you don't need to, this could be completely independent, but on the same theme of what you think has changed significantly in the college since you stepped down.
Right, so, you know, when I became interim dean, it was coincident with the start of the Great Recession. So, you know, at a counting the numbers level, we had not just one budget cut in a year, but we had several budget cuts in one year, and if I remember correctly, a couple more, or at least one more budget cut in the second year. So in that respect, one of the things that's changed is we are no longer in a being compressed mode. We're a little bit more in a growth mode, but the consequences of that Great Recession and the shift and change from state support when we were getting, I think, something on the order of 2/3 of the costs were coming from the state to now where we're getting about a half of the educational coming from the state, has been both good and bad. It's caused a greater emphasis, not just within the college, but at Georgia Tech as a whole, on industrial support and on, it's encouraged a lot, even more entrepreneurship on the part of faculty to go after the really large grants from NSF and DARPA and so on and so forth, and I think we've been successful at that.
Syed, from your perspective, something significant that's changed over the time you've watched the College of Computing?
Well, the campus doesn't look like anything I remember. Either my memory is faded or campus has completely changed. I believe it's the second. It's been college has been a complete success. It's a lot bigger than what we imagined when it started. Peter remarked that it was at the beginning, it was kind of benign neglect. Partially got through because most people in campus who eventually gave in and agreed for a college to happen figured it wasn't going anywhere. And so it's a totally unqualified success, and it's great for the whole state.
You've got a question back there.
Charles, I thought you were going to the airport.
And the changes that
Turn it on.
there's a switch.
It's on.
Oh, I can be
It's
heard?
on.
Okay, never mind, sorry. I'm curious if I could ask anyone on the panel to do the counterfactual. What would Georgia Tech look like if the College of Computing had never happened? If we had become, as a part of the big reorg, had become a school in the College of Engineering, for example? I mean, what wouldn't we be doing today that we're doing now? How different would things be?
Oh. Well, I may have, no, you've got the longest view.
So I think counterfactual, so no evidence required, just pure science fiction. Because I spent several years at Purdue, I had a window into what can happen to a technologically oriented university when they don't have something like the College of Computing. you reduce focus, you become stagnant relative to what's going on. I hope there's no other Purdue graduates in the room. But Purdue has consistently had the same opportunities that Georgia Tech has had to move to where new technologies are going, where new sciences are going, and the fact that they deliberately contained computer science in a single department and limited its interactions to the rest of the university. I think we would end up looking a lot like Purdue, and not much like the current Georgia Tech as a result.
Another question from the audience.
May I answer
Please, go ahead.
also? So in Georgia Tech, and I think that's because we are college, we are not only have a college. I have a talk, now I talk only on OMS. I cannot change the subject, but I used to give the talk, about Georgia Tech way of doing computer science. And so first we are a college, which is extremely unique. And but then, in addition, that only because we are a college, we are central to Georgia Tech. You count the centers, you count the IRI, IPAT, IRENE, IGTESC, IData, all of them are led by us.
Yeah.
And it reflects the real world. In the real world, computer science is central everywhere. It's also central in universities because everybody needs not just to use a computer, research about the computer. Except that universities are the most conservative structures in the world. University and the church,
Catholic Church
have not changed. These are the only institutions that haven't changed.
Yeah.
So what happened here? Maybe you guys have been here and you don't notice and don't appreciate it. It's kind of amazing.
Yeah.
There are not many, very few. You must just became a college, very few. But that's. Computer science place is not in engineering, and it's not in arts and science,
Right.
and it's not in science. And they're second-rate citizen unless the dean is from computer science.
Right.
At Columbia, they were lucky, but
Right. I think that's an excellent answer, and I would give a complimentary answer that is based on the intellectual substance, not only the structural or organizational situation, which of course is exceedingly important. Intellectually, as I pointed out in my lecture yesterday, we can trace a history of breadth back to Vannevar Bush, and in particular to Slameka, who said, we are going to have concentration on the design of information systems. That's the broad, human, organizational, usage-oriented information systems that we are so well known for. Secondly, the design of the computer systems to implement them, the technology, and third, the theories. That's something that the only place I know that does it as well as we do, and in some ways broader, but they've been at it longer, or with more support, is CMU, where I did my graduate work, and as did Dick Lipton in the very early days. It too had that broad idea, although quite honestly not as well grounded in the way that Slameka, building on Vannevar Bush, did. So I think there are two good reasons why we're that way.
I mean, I would even argue that there's an intellectual underpinning that no one else on campus shares.
Oh,
and
yeah.
It's living in a world of Moore's law. Just to kind of make a broad point. We're in a field that reinvents itself every 10 years. And
Every 2.5.
if we had been bound to generational restrictions on what we can do, we'd just now be implementing the 1988 ACM curriculum. And somehow this infected Georgia Tech. I mean, you can see it in biomedical engineering. This whole north part of the campus didn't exist 15 years ago.
No.
And this is all technologies, disciplines that ride technology curves like ours. And somehow the university has adapted itself to that.
Absolutely.
Compare that to a traditional university, and it's the difference between night and day.
Yep.
Meg?
I'm Meg Porterman. I work in the Office of Development, and I have a question that I'd like to specifically ask our deans. What was your most rewarding experience, or a rewarding experience, for example, during your time as dean? What's something that really sticks out in your mind as a rewarding experience?
Most rewarding.
I'll answer on my own behalf. You're sitting in it. It wasn't while I was dean, it was from long before, during, and long after, was the building of this Klaus Advanced Computing Building. Peter and Rich both were deans during critical periods of that construction, and it also brings to mind the relationship to ECE. As you know, we share this building with ECE. There was a time when I thought this building was never going to get finished. The fall of 2002, when I was the interim dean, is when they started digging the hole, and 3 hurricanes went through that fall. Maybe it wasn't 2000. No, that's a little too early. Maybe it was later than that. What year did they start digging the hole? 2004?
Started digging in 06.
In 06. Well, there were 3 hurricanes, and so we had a swimming pool for a parking deck for quite a long period of time.
Don't forget the bedrock.
So it's a little unfair to count that as something that happened while I was dean, because it was before and after, but for me, that's the single thing that I would point to. And a lot of that also was the relationships, was the people, and what they were going to do in this building, not of course just the bricks and mortar, the glass and steel.
Can I add one?
Please.
Having served twice as long as the next person next to me here, I should be able to have 2, but I'll limit it to 1. And Ellen suggests it. It was a breakfast at the White House. Now, not the one up where I live now, but the one out on Peachtree Road, which is was, if it's still there, one of the little cafes where Atlanta's political elite and so forth would gather. And Mary Alice and I and John Staten and Tom Noonan took Chris Klaus to breakfast. And Chris, are you in the room? Well, you're here, thank you. And I remember very well the conversation and Chris agreeing to provide us a $15 million cash gift, the largest that had been made in those terms to Georgia Tech at that time, which got all of this started.
Rich?
So again, there are lots of stories that could be told. My memory is quite personal. So I met John Imlay when I was an assistant professor, and Pete Jensen literally took me by the lapels and marched me into John Imlay's office and told John, you need to work with this guy. John was the CEO of a brand new software company called Management Science America. They were going through some rough times, and that started a relationship with John that just continued through my many incarnations as a computer scientist. And so when I came back in 2002, John threw a reception for me at his house. And you know, it's hard to encapsulate, you know, a 30-year relationship with someone. But you know, there was a moment that evening when John and I sat down together and we talked about me holding the chair that was named for him. and then me inquiring whether or not I was actually going to be in his will as a result. It's a poignant story because of course John just passed away a few weeks ago.
The will is to the current holder of the gene, John Image.
But those are kind of magic moments when there's a conjunction of a personal affection and personal relationships with the professional thing, and that's the thing that I'll always carry with me.
Jim, would you like to take that?
I don't think I have one. I have not really concentrated on the last 4 years. I had some many happy moments, but there is no one that stands out.
Okay. Syed, a happy moment standing out for you in your relationship to COC? A proud moment?
We've all been happy.
That's a good answer. Just giving a chance if there's anyone else in the audience who wants to ask. Dick.
I just want to follow up on the hospital and say thank you to you. You were in charge of...
I just want to thank Ellen, because weren't you on the programming group?
I
You
was
can tell people what that means.
Yeah.
And
She
I
was in charge of it.
In charge of it, and I think you also can tell us why we have something really cool below us called a parking garage.
I was what's called the user representative, together with Jay Schlag of ECE, who passed away within the last year or two. And Dick's correct that I frequently had to explain to our colleagues that when the architects talked about programming the building, they didn't actually mean that we were going to write something in Java. Maybe today we would, but that was the architect terminology was programming the building. Actually, the building also had something to do, I think, with the fact that I had this unusual opportunity to be interim dean. When we were getting going on the building project, I was the space queen. I was assistant dean for facilities or something. And Peter used to take me with him when we would go talk to the provost. It was Jean-Louis Chameau at the time. And during some portion of that time, I was pregnant with my second daughter. And when Jean-Louis asked me if I would take on this interim dean role, I remember he gave Peter a hard time, and he said, I had no problem, this is Jean-Louis, I had no problem saying no to you, Peter, but then you brought this pregnant lady with you, and I really had a hard time saying no. So I got to know Jean-Louis not well, but at least enough during that experience of the building that when whatever backroom conversations led to asking me to be the interim dean, I'm sure there was some role played by familiarity.
I have a great, very short story about programming. You don't have to explain that to architects, I don't think, these days, but somewhere around 1978 or so, I was giving a professional development seminar on structured programming in Edmonton, Canada in February. It was 20 degrees below. But that was warm, and some people had come down for the seminar from a town 600 miles north called Yellowknife, Yukon Territory. And after my introduction that morning, at break, they came up to me and they said, we thought this was going to be about programming. And I said, yes. And they said, well, we work for the prison system, and our job is to organize and plan the jail cell layout. I said, go back home.
I wanted to end with a question that I think Rich made a reference to it in his opening remarks. And I think it's just, there's too much brain power sitting up here and experience to let the opportunity go by, not to raise something that I think continues to be a challenge, and that is diversity. In 1993, the college went from 2 female faculty members to 3. and continue to add faculty members at a very steady, not large, but steady rate over the time period since. But nonetheless, in the intervening 20-plus years from that, going from 2 to 3, diversity remains a challenge for computing in almost anywhere that you look, and in some ways even perhaps more of a challenge today than it has been recently. If you look to the tech sector and the kinds of things that seem to be happening, at least in some portions of the tech sector. So I wanted to ask the group whether you think we're doing enough with respect to diversity in the College of Computing, and are we doing too much? And maybe stepping back from both of those a little bit, what should our aspirations be, and what's the right way to think about this? How should the College of Computing at Georgia Tech be thinking about the challenges that are undoubtedly, I mean, this isn't an easy problem. If it were, it would have been solved. But it's hard and it's persistent. And Rich, I'm wondering if maybe you might start, because you said something to me interesting about this. I don't know if you'll say that same interesting thing, but you'll say something interesting.
Oh dear, now I'm on the spot for saying something interesting too. The short answer is no, we're not doing enough. And I think if you look around computer science programs in the United States, certainly we're not doing enough. And in this thing that I enshrined in the Bruckman-Minot principle, I think is something you really have to internalize. So when people get to be sophomores, juniors, seniors, and they start thinking about where life is going to take them, they project out from where they are now to some future. And you can see that in some of the disciplines on this campus, like biomedical engineering, that's a future that includes different kinds of thinking, different kinds of jobs, different kinds of organizational roles than the typical coder has. And so as long as we limit ourselves to being a place that produces coders, even dramatically cool coders like the ones in IC, we're going to be stuck in that role. So my hope is that we go back to our roots, expand the boundaries of computing, expand the intellectual boundaries of the field, and figure out where the leader's going to go. And offer those programs to them. So I see this in the classes that I teach. So, there was a bright young woman in the 4001 class I just taught, who at the end of the semester posted something on Piazza that had to do with her kind of conversion from thinking about being the only woman in a class of 30 males in a programming class to being something else after she graduates. And she literally went through, in a paragraph, this conversion to becoming a feminist. I shared this with Ellen, so she knows exactly what I'm talking about. That needs to be systematized, and we need to figure out how those conversions take place and structure our programs so that we're not just artificially cutting things off at a kind of career or a kind of person that happens to be in vogue today.
Being the resident historian at the moment, I will defer to Zvi to talk about whether we're doing enough or not, among other things, because I'm not entirely well informed on what's going on right now. But I will give just a little bit of perspective from my own personal standpoint, and that is that obviously we're all a part of a larger society. And obviously diversity is, and the story, effort, the fight to get better diversity of all kinds acceptable and accepted in our society goes forward by fits and starts, sometimes 2 steps forward and 1 step back. At the same time, a university, and most especially a forward-looking university, and most especially one like this one and this college, need to be leaders in that society. So we should always be doing more than the general society. We should always be at least noticeably better than the general society, because we are all members of that society, et cetera. You know or can easily determine all of the various arguments about that. But I think that it's important, as Rich said, as Ellen suggests, that we continue to make efforts. It's a matter of the kind of really long-term progressive drift, the progressive progress of, to use a tautology, of Western society. And we're currently seeing, of course, some very terrible regressions on the fringes of Western society and even in the hearts of it from time to time. But I think all of us as enlightened citizens, and if you look back, certainly society as a whole in this country and in Western Europe is a much more liberal in the small L sense than it was when I was born and others in the room of similar age. But we have to keep pushing it forward, and we have to be the leaders.
Syed.
I'm just going to offer an opinion that if you really want to affect diversity, this is a subject we've been talking about for as long as I can remember. And if we really want to affect it, we have to get involved at high school level. That's where it starts. We can fight over the limited supply of minority faculty, until the cows come home. But if we want to change the picture significantly, we have to go back to get involved in high schools and interest the students in tell them what a productive and bright future they'll have in computing and get them interested.
Yeah. One of the great innovations that we made in our curriculum a few years ago was the computational media program that bridged between computing and design and literature. I think we've fallen down since then in not continuing to think in those terms. I'm a big believer in computing plus X for all X. The computational media is an example of that for X of digital media. We do a little bit through computational science and engineering. We reach out into bioinformatics a little bit. TD teaches a course on computing for bioinformaticians, I believe. But I would love to see us be much more intentional on computing plus X, not just the minor, which a lot of our students are taking at Georgia Tech, but a much more intentional program than that.
Anyone else want a last word?
Not the last, he will have the last. We're not doing well. Actually, we're doing better than many because of CM. So we are, with CM, we are, I think, 23%, which is high. I mean, undergraduates, women. But CM is 50-50, and CS is 18 or something like that. CM is too small. CM is 10% or 15% of CS. So, but thanks to CM, we are 23, which is a very high. And not compare, MIT found a way to do it. Maria was here, and she in Harvey Mudd does wonders, but it's a little bit cheating. Harvey Mudd has 700 undergraduates, or total number of students, 700 or 800. They are a third of, it's a university, they are a third of the size of the college. So when you have, and they are very good college, so when you have such a small size, you can architect the class however you wish. But she also does many, many great things in Harvey Mudd. She knows, by the way, she knows every student's first name, so I stop at 5. But we're not doing great, and indeed should start in high school. So Barb is doing many things in high school, and really brings quite a number of student women and some minorities to computer science, but they don't all come to Georgia Tech. They go everywhere. I visit every student, not every, the main student groups. We have 31. It's a little bit difficult to visit all of them, but you know, the general one, the graduate one, the minority one, the women one, and I asked the women to go to high schools. So we may try to send them to high school, because the perception out there is that the jobs, many of them exist in computer science, kind of boring coding, no diversity in the job, and very misleading picture. There are many exciting opportunities for computer scientists, but I'd love to do much, much better.
Rich, a last word?
Sure. I spent last academic year in Doha, Qatar, and you know, there are some American campuses, a half dozen, maybe 10 American campuses. Carnegie Mellon has a campus there, and Texas A&M has a campus there. And so occasionally I would go give a lecture at the CMU campus in Doha. Islamic country, you don't normally think of as a strict Islamic country as being particularly friendly to women. And I was amazed in my first visit. I looked out at the audience. It was predominantly female. The vast majority of the undergraduates at CMU Qatar are women. Why is that?
I know.
It's because the career opportunities for a woman in information technology in Qatar are unlimited. They own the space. They get to define the rules. And this is true across the Middle East. Women pour into the field because that's where the career opportunities are. So I think I agree with everything that was said on the panel. We need to reach into high schools. We need to fix what's wrong with our curriculum. But it's at the end of the pipeline where the problem is. As long as people believe there's a career path for them that's compelling, they will pour into our field. We're going to see that with students of color. We're going to see that with women students, with all minorities, and that's my real hope, that we can somehow get to that problem.
One sentence, Peter.
No.
Okay, so one of the rules.
I can't speak one sentence.
I know. Another rule of panels is don't let them go too far past their ending time. So I want to close with two connected thoughts. One is that I hope the next time there's a gathering of all of the deans and interim deans of the College of Computing, that we are all here. And second, I hope that we will be able to discuss progress on this issue of diversity. We probably won't have this kind of gathering for a minimum of 10 more years, so we've got some time. But I'm going to try to remember that that's how we close this one, and I see a few people in the audience are going to help me remember that. So with that, I want to thank you, the audience, for your participation, and thank the panel for their very interesting and insightful comments.